In this first set of workshops, we're going to take the drawings that we did in the Level 1 workshops and further develop them using the skills and functions we have learnt in Level 2. We'll start with a t-shirt and we'll apply a series of different pattern fills. I've got the t-shirt file open at the moment. I'm going to use the selection tool to select the front of the t-shirt only, and I'm going to paste it into a new document. Let's do a Control-C to copy. Got a new document here and a Control-V to paste. Now I'm going to make 3 copies of this t-shirt so that we can apply 4 different types of pattern. To make the copies, I'm going to duplicate the current layer 3 times by dragging it onto the new layer icon in the Layers panel. I'll now need to lock 3 of the layers, leaving one unlocked whilst I move the t-shirt copies into their own space on the artboard. Okay, and one more. So let's start with our first t-shirt. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing. To start with, we'll create a basic stripe using a pattern fill. I'm going to take the rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a small horizontal rectangle. I'm going to give it a pink coloured fill and stroke. So using Control, Shift and Alt or Command, Shift and Option for Mac users, I'm going to drag a copy down, snapping it to the bottom of the first rectangle. And this one I'm going to give a grey fill and a grey stroke. This modest pair of rectangles will become my stripe fill for my t-shirt. I just need to select both of them and then drag them onto the swatch panel to make a pattern swatch. Now I could just go ahead and select my t-shirt and fill it with the pattern swatch. But notice how the stripes on the sleeves do not look realistic, as they do not mimic how the pattern would appear on the grain of the fabric. So let's just do a Control Z or a Command Z to undo, and I'll show you how to make this look more realistic. I'm going to draw a selection box over the whole t-shirt. And then I'm going to select the Shape Builder tool, and I'm going to click once on each sleeve. This has made my sleeves separate shapes to the body. I'm then going to select just one of the sleeves and then the rotation tool. The reference point for the rotation needs to be set in the base of the armhole. So let's just drag that to here. I can then go ahead and rotate the sleeve like so. I'm going to repeat that same function with the other sleeve. So select the sleeve, drag the reference point to the base of the armhole, and just rotate it out. Selecting the body and each sleeve, I can then fill with my pattern swatch. So let's hold down Shift to select all 3 and then use the pattern swatch. So let's now rotate the sleeves back into place. First, I'm going to double click on the Rotate tool to bring up the options, and you need to make sure that the Transform Pattern box is ticked here. If you do not select this, then the pattern fill will not rotate with the sleeve. So let's click OK. I can now go ahead and select the sleeve and the Rotate tool and drag the reference point back to the base of the armhole and rotate the sleeve back towards the body. And I'm going to repeat this with the right hand sleeve. Now the stripes look more realistic and are in line with the grain of the fabric. At the moment, the inside of the t-shirt also shows the stripy pattern. To define this area as the inside, I want to give this a darker grey fill. As this area is not an object in its own right, I can't just select it and give it a fill. I'll show you a trick for doing this without having to mess around copying the paths to form a fillable object. So using the selection tool, I'm going to drag a box over the neck area. And then with the shape builder tool, I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and click in the neck area. And this removes it and fills it white. I'm now going to draw a rectangle over the neck with the rectangle tool that has no stroke and a dark grey fill. With the new rectangle selected, I'm going to right click, go to Arrange and Send to Back. And there we have it, a dark grey fill on the inside of the garment. Okay, so let's now move on to our second t-shirt. First, I'll delete the stripe artwork and lock the current layer and then unlock the layer of t-shirt 2. For this one, we'll create a star print repeat using the pattern options panel. First, we need to create a tile that can be used to build the repeat pattern. I'll start by drawing the background of the tile with the rectangle tool. I want it to be perfectly square, so I'll hold down the Shift key as I drag. I'm going to give this a tan coloured fill and no stroke. Using the star tool, I'm then going to draw a 5-point star starting from the centre point of the square. I'm going to give this a dark brown fill and no stroke. Now I can use the arrow keys just to nudge it into a better position that looks more central. So let's draw another 5-point star starting in the centre of the first one. And this one I'm going to give a yellow fill and no stroke. And again we can just nudge its position with the arrow keys. My tile is now complete, but it's looking a little big, so let's select it and scale it down with the Shift key to constrain the proportions. With the tile still selected, I'm going to go to Object and then Pattern and Make. This opens up the pattern options where I can define the settings for my pattern. I'm going to call it Star Print. And then I'm going to set it to brick by row. And I'll leave the offset at half. I'm then going to click Done to save. Before I use the star print as the fill, I want to rotate the sleeves as we did for the first t-shirt to make it look more realistic. So let's select the whole t-shirt, and then with the shape builder tool, I'm going to click once on each sleeve. I can now select one of the sleeves and the rotation tool, and we'll drag the reference point to the armhole here and drag the first sleeve out and then repeat again with the right sleeve. I can now select both sleeves and the body and fill it with our star print. We are now ready to rotate the sleeves back into place. So let's select it with the selection tool, choose the rotate tool, drag the reference point to the armhole, and rotate back into place and then repeat with the second sleeve. Now the grey rib neck doesn't quite look right, so I'm going to select it with the selection tool and I'm going to fill it with the same brown that we used in the star print. On the previous t-shirt I showed you a trick for colouring the inner neck area. I'm now going to show you an alternative feature called Live Paint. So with the selection tool I'm going to select the whole neck area. You will find the Live Paint bucket tool under the Shape Builder tool. When I hover over the selected parts of the drawing, I get the instruction to click to make a Live Paint group. So let's go ahead and do that. You can see from the message that comes up that some complex visual elements may be lost when converting to a Live Paint group. If you find this happens, then you can always use the previous method I showed you in the first t-shirt instead. So let's just go ahead and click OK to this message. When I click, the neck area becomes filled with the current fill swatch colour. I can use the cursor preview to switch between the colours in my swatch panel using the arrow keys on my keyboard. So I've chosen a dark grey. If you cannot see the swatch preview cursor, then double click on the live paint tool in the tool panel and tick cursor swatch preview. Once you turn an object or selection of objects into a live paint group, they remain a live paint group, so you can go back and use the live paint bucket tool again on them at a later stage. So let's just go ahead and change the fill to dark grey in the neck area. Within the live paint group, Illustrator calculates the shapes between visually closed paths, allowing you to fill areas that are not closed paths or objects in their own right. The fill areas that are being calculated are indicated by the thick red border that appears as you hover over the group with the mouse. One other thing to note with a live paint group is that when you look at the layer panel, so let's just expand the layer it's on here, the objects within the group are grouped just like any other grouped object would be under the title of Live Paint Group. Okay, so let's move on to t-shirt number 3. I'm just going to delete this artwork here because we no longer need it, and I shall lock this layer, unlock the layer for t-shirt 3, and let's just pan up to it here. For this t-shirt we are going to make a random repeat print. These are a little bit harder to create as we can't use the pattern options panel to do the hard work for us. So let's start with creating some artwork. We'll go for a daisy print. I'm going to use the ellipse tool to draw a petal shape. So let's just change the fill and stroke colours around here so we can see that a bit better. I'll next select it, and I'm going to use the rotate tool to pivot the petal around the central axes. So let's select the rotate tool and move the reference point down to the centre here. And I'm going to use Control, Shift and Alt, or Command, Shift and Option for Mac users to rotate and make a copy. I'm then going to hit Control D or Command D a number of times to duplicate that copy to finish off the petals within the flower. Let's now select all the petals with the selection tool, and I'm going to open up the Pathfinder panel and choose the Unite function to make it all one shape. I'm then going to use the ellipse tool to draw the pollen head. So I'm going to hold down Shift to make it a perfect circle and Alt or Option to draw from the centre. I'm going to give the pollen head a yellow fill and no stroke. And then I'm going to give the petals a white fill and no stroke. To make the daisy easier to move around, I'm going to select all the components, right click and choose group. I now need to create the background for my tile. I'm going to create a square using the rectangle tool. So let's go ahead and select it. And I'm going to click once on the artboard, and I'm going to enter the exact dimensions of 100 pixels for both the width and the height. Let's give the rectangle a pale blue fill and no stroke. I now need to right click on the rectangle and choose Arrange and Centre Back so that it will be behind our daisy. So let's take our daisy and make a few copies using the Control and Alt key or Command and Option key for Mac users. And I'm just going to go ahead and resize them here because they're a little bit big. I'm now going to use the warp effect on the daisies to make all of them slightly different. So from the effects menu, I'm going to choose warp, and let's choose bulge for this one. I'll just go ahead and adjust these sliders a little bit to make it a little bit warped and click OK. And I'll repeat with each one of the daisies. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit. So let's just scale them all down a little bit further. So using the Shift key to constrain the proportions, I'm going to make them all slightly different sizes. I'm then going to make a couple of extra instances using the Control and Alt key or Command and Option key. Now I need to position the daisies on the background to make the pattern. In order to make this work as a seamless repeatable tile, I'm going to have to position some of the daisies overlapping the edges and mirror them on the opposite side of the tile. So let's position some on the top edge and then some on the left edge. Next, I'll select one of the daisies overlapping the left edge and I'm going to right click, choose Transform and Move. In the dialog box, I'm going to type in 100 pixels in the horizontal field and 0 pixels in the vertical field. I'm then going to hit Copy. I now have the daisy overlapping the other side of the tile to make a perfect repeat. I need to repeat this with the other daisy on the left edge. So right click, Transform and Move, 100 pixels in the horizontal field, 0 in the vertical, and hit Copy. The same method needs to be used on the top edge daisies, but the figures are slightly different. So let's right click, choose Transform and Move. This time I'm going to enter 0 pixels in the horizontal and 100 pixels in the vertical and click Copy. And let's repeat that with the other daisy. I can now just go ahead and add a few extra copies of my daisy here just to complete my tile. We now need to make this into a pattern swatch. In order to define the edges, I need to take a copy of the background tile. So let's select it, and I'm going to do a Control C or Command C to copy and then a Control or Command F to paste in front. I'm then going to give it no fill and I'm going to right click and choose Arrange and Send to Back. Illustrator uses this to form the pattern tile, so anything beyond its edges doesn't get included. I can now drag a selection box over the whole artwork and drag it onto the swatch panel. So let's just zoom out so we can see our t-shirt and pan across here. So before we fill the t-shirt, we just need to use the Shape Builder tool method to separate the sleeves again. So I'm going to select all the t-shirt, choose the Shape Builder tool, click once on the left sleeve, once on the right sleeve, and then we can select one sleeve, choose the rotation tool. Let's drag this reference point to the base of the armhole here and rotate and repeat with the right hand sleeve. We can now select both the sleeves and the body and fill them with the daisy print. So let's now rotate those sleeves back into place. So I'll select the right one, select the rotation tool, drag the reference point to the armhole base there and rotate, and same again with the left hand sleeve. To finish off, I'm going to give the rib neck a fill colour to match the background print, or at least one that goes a little bit better. So let's choose this slightly darker blue here.